March 1960, Essen, North Rhine-Westphalia. I used to investigate political enemies. Now I investigate murders. The badge on my coat changed. The habits did not. A policeman writes this line in a notebook. He dates it. He slides the notebook back into a drawer with case files. He locks the drawer. He signs Carl M. in a hand that has not changed since 1937. He still underlines names. He still fixes time. He still believes in sequence. He knows that what can be written in 1960 in a private notebook could not have been voiced into a microphone or addressed to a room of men who wear the same coats, stand by the same coffee pot, and share the same coffee pot, and share the same silence. He knows that the city around him looks new. Concrete, glass, Volkswagen Beetles at the curb, shop windows bright at 17W0 in winter. He also knows that he can walk to a courtyard where an old wall still shows the rounded scars of shrapnel. He recognizes rubble even when it has been swept into foundations. He starts with 1945. The end that did not end. 12. April 1945, Essen. British armour enters from the west. The sirens, which had screamed so often it had become a colour in the air, are silent for once. A white flag over the Rathaus. The police station's keys handed over, then handed back, then taken again. The town's diary for that day in the city archive is short. No more firing. Civilians instructed to remain indoors. Curfew at 2000 drun. No German in the streets. The first boots are British. The second boots, within a week, are German again. The occupation can't function without a German police. The mathematics of order is that you need those who know the streets. Karl stands in a hallway and waits for an officer of the military government. He holds a paper that says he is Kriminalsekretär, reassigned to general duties. He does not mention his prior detail. He does not mention the interviews in 1942 that were not about theft or assault. He gives the keys to the evidence cabinet. He leaves out the coil of rubber hose still under the desk, the one that everyone pretended was for something else. He waits for the British to look at his face and his boots and decide. They decide he can continue under supervision. There is fear in those weeks. Fear of retribution. Fear of Russians. Fear of German. Werewolves that were largely a rumor but worked like a story told to children. An Allied intelligence summary from the British Public Safety Branch mentions it. The extent of organized underground resistance in the Ruhr is negligible. However, rumors persist to be countered with firm curfew enforcement. So the police show up, salute a new power, and keep enforcing. The arithmetic of fear is that the policeman and the citizen both learn to stand still when a jeep rolls by. May 1945. Trümmerfrauen in the morning. They pick brick from brick. They stack, they shovel, they unload at noon, eat a potato and unload again. A photograph in the Bundesarchiv shows a woman in a headscarf standing on a pile that is almost the outline of the city. She has a narrow mouth. The caption, Essen, summer 1945. Trümmerfrau beim Freiräumen der Straßen. Karl's wife writes in June, "Your boots, Karl, are good for climbing the stairs without banisters." She writes to him when he is in a displaced office, quartered in a school. The stamps are British. The letter is filed, folded, then archived 40 years later. It names 3 neighbors dead. It names the cellar where they survived the last raid. It mentions a brother missing. She writes vermist and underlines it twice. She writes vermist and underlines it twice. That's how families speak about a man who is not coming back, but must not be admitted as gone. The immediate aftermath is measured in calories. OMGUS and British Zone occupation reports calculate it bluntly. In summer 1945, rations in the industrial Ruhr drop under 1,500 calories. In January 1946, the number falls again. The hunger winter. The arithmetic of hunger is simple and brutal. You need 2,000 calories to work. You receive 1,000. You work anyway. You eat turnips. You trade your mother's ring for a lump of butter. You boil nettles. You go to the black market at the train station, and you stand under the long iron roof where once schedules were hung, and now the pricing of cigarettes is written silently in eyes and fingers. Cigarettes as currency. Chesterfields move like gold. An Allied report, January 1947, in the British zone, a pack of 20 American cigarettes averages 1,000 Reichsmarks value, fluctuating per locality. Cigs used as remuneration in barter for food and services. The math of the black market is opportunistic, but not chaotic. 1 cigarette equals 2 eggs. 10 cigarettes equals a pair of shoes. The police write reports. They also buy shoes. Karl's notebook in 1946 has a line, 2 hours for 1 loaf, queue at Becker Schulte, ration card for 3 people. He writes a case number beneath it. Case 111-1046, theft of ration cards. He arrests a 15-year-old boy. He looks at him and sees himself as a miner's son. He feels a tug in his own chest. He still signs the form. He writes cleanly. The Allied zones differ. Essen is British. The British bring their habits. They are less doctrinaire than the Americans on some days, more so on others. They talk of denazification while requisitioning German policemen they would otherwise have to fire. The US in Hesse and Bavaria processes questionnaires on a bewildering scale, 13 million, Fragebogen in the US zone. The British zones are less comprehensive in volume, but similar in spirit. The denazification files for Karl's city live in a grey archive box labelled Spruchkammer Essen, 1946-49, then count numbers. September 1945. The forms arrive. Fragebogen, 32 pages. Did you join the NSDAP? Which organizations? SA, SS, NSKK, NSFK, National Socialist Welfare? The question about donations. The question about colleagues. Karl receives Form A. He stares. He considers which truth is now the kind that keeps his family fed. He writes that he joined the party in 1938 to protect his job. He writes that he attended meetings, Selten. He writes that he spent no time with SA or SS. He does not mention that when he investigated a Heimtücke case in 1941, he did so in a room with a portrait on the wall. He notes simply, Kriminalinspektor Soit 1939, Abteilung 2, Diebstahl. He names a superior who is in custody. He does not name the names of the men who were taken from the lockup at 02.00 to a different building with a different name on the door. He writes, I followed directives. The mathematics of guilt sits on a table in 1947 as a Spruchkammer sorts people into categories: Hauptschuldig, major offenders; Belastet offenders; Minderbelastet, lesser offenders; Mitläufer followers; Entlastet, exonerated. The numbers are printed in an Allied intelligence summary with percentage points. They are at once precise and meaningless. The categories are political, they are legal, they are emotional. Karl appears for a hearing in summer 1947. There is a judge who was a judge before the war, a lay assessor who lost a brother in Stalingrad, a secretary who writes with a sharp nib. There is one British officer in the room for early hearings, then none. An Allied presence becomes a shadow. A paper in his file notes, Gestapo contact not proven. Party service nominal. Probable category Mitläufer. He brings a letter from his pastor. He brings a statement from a neighbor who says he warned her that her husband would be taken. He does not mention that he also signed the arrest for that husband, who was never seen again. That man's name is in a different archive, not in this room. He is ruled Minderbelasteter first. He appeals. He is reclassified as Mitläufer. He is fined. He is prohibited from serving in significant roles until 1949. The practical result is that he remains in the police station as a pensioned clerk, drawing on his old expertise without the title. Then, like many, he comes back. The 131er Gesetz, the law of 1951 restoring civil servants dismissed since 8 May 1945, is an arithmetic problem with a moral variable. Stability requires the staff who know the files are the staff who were there. In the mathematics of institutional memory, continuity wins. The city's other arithmetic is population. 10 million expellees and refugees move west, then 12, then more. Germans from Königsberg, from Silesia, from the Sudetenland. By 1950, the West German population is swollen. Schleswig-Holstein sees its people almost doubled. Lower Saxony, North Rhine, Westphalia, Bavaria absorb columns of the displaced. The trains bring them by the hundreds. They step down with burlap sacks and a child on a hip. Karl's neighbor comes from Breslau. Her name in the registry is penciled as Erika S. Geb. 1922, Fleur for Flöschling. She has a strip of paper pinned to her coat with a number from a camp near Uelzen. She knocks and asks if there is a room. There is not, but the Wohnungsamt will say there is. The housing office can assign a room by paper authority. The occupant can protest. The protest is usually rejected. In 1946, the ordinance arrives at Karl's door. 2 rooms will be requisitioned for a family of 3. He moves his desk. His wife moves the wedding portrait to the top shelf in the kitchen. The arithmetic of rooms is relentless. A family of 4 in 2 rooms equals a constant intake of apologies and a silent accumulation of resentments. The locals say, Zugezogeni. The newcomers say, Ihr hattet doch alles. They bring different recipes and a different accent, and sometimes a different faith. The local priest mentions in his diary that 3 children from the East refused to join the same choir because the rhythm of the hymns felt wrong. Localities become a laboratory in how to share a thin loaf. The city registers the tensions in police reports. Trespass. Shouting. On 17 October 1946, a report notes, altercation after a queue dispute at Metzger IH, 1 local, 1 refugee. No injuries. Mediated. The language is neutral. The feelings are not. Oral histories recorded in the 1980s with women who were in their teens in 1946 remember a rage that went unspoken and then softened into habit because the market needed all hands and the schoolyard did not care after the food. Beyond the Germans, other camps spread near German towns. Displaced persons. Jews from Poland and the Baltics. Ukrainians, Belarusians, French forced laborers waiting for trains. A British occupation report for the Bergen-Belsen district in late 1945 registers 11,000 Jews still in the DP camp, 9,000 non-Jewish DPs. The camp had been a camp of death. It becomes a place of births, speeches, and a market where the watchtowers look like a terrible joke. Germans in Celle cycle past it and look away. Sometimes they are made to enter. Photographs show them walking in a line, white-faced, under British guidance, looking at rooms stacked with sticks that were bodies. The mathematics of witnessing is not direct. Seeing does not equal admitting. The distance between eye and conscience is measured in millimeters and decades. Karl is sent to Bergen-Belsen twice in 1946, as a liaison between British camp police and German police in nearby villages, because there were thefts of potatoes and fights at the camp boundary. His memo reads, "Cooperate with DP police. Avoid direct intervention. Report incidents." In his notebook, he scribbles 4 words. He smelled cremation ash. He never shows that notebook to anyone. He writes in 1958 about that smell. He cannot find a word for it. He calls it sweet bitter. He has learned to lock a drawer. There is a second wave, Soviet POWs who survived and fear going home. Poles who do not want Warsaw. Lithuanians who know their village is no longer on a map that will accept them. The DP camps policed themselves under Allied supervision. There were theatre troupes, schools, illegal committees collecting funds to help people pass borders. Germans in town talk about Die Juden im Lager without naming them as survivors of the killing, and about die Ostarbeiter, those Eastern workers, as if they were a weather phenomenon that has not cleared. The contact is constant and indirect. A potato vanishes. A piece of sheet metal goes missing. An argument at a well is resolved by a British soldier who has learned enough German to say, "Enough." A German policeman notes it and files it. The distance between filing and responsibility is its own arithmetic. The police go on working. There is petty murder. There is a man who kills a man for a ration card in 1946 and is given 15 years. There is a woman who poisons her husband with rat poison because he beats her when drunk, and the court reduces it to manslaughter given exceptional circumstances. The files read like a grey water. Life, and this matters, resumes. 20. June 1948. Currency reform. The day that smells like cologne and soap for the first time in years. It smells like banknotes. The Allied printing presses deliver the Deutsche Mark. The old Reichsmarks are exchanged for a haircut. The black market collapses in a day. Displays appear in shop windows. Women cry in front of fruit. The mathematics of abundance replaces the mathematics of scarcity in an afternoon. A British report notes spontaneous increase in retail activity, particularly in clothing and food items. The same week, Ludwig Erhard speaks on the radio about price liberalization. He does not ask for permission from his military governors. The shock is a policy. It works. Karl buys a loaf of bread without a ration card for the first time since 1939. He eats it in the tram. He thinks of all the times he cut bread into exact slices for children, because exactness is his calling. He is still exact. 1949. The Basic Law is announced. The Federal Republic of Germany is proclaimed. Bonn, not Berlin, is the capital. The Allies remain, but now there are ministries with German names. The police forces in the Länder are reorganized. The word Kriminalpolizei returns in a democratic context. Men are vetted and reinstated. Many are not vetted thoroughly. A Bundesarchiv directory of personnel lists in the B162 series shows an astonishing continuity of names across the years. The mathematics of bureaucracy favors those who understand forms. Karl receives his reinstatement in December 1949. Kriminalobeраssistent, then Kriminalkommissar again by 1952. His denazification category is noted in small print at the bottom of the page. The page is stamped again when he receives a pension in 1970. He is assigned to a new Mord Commission, a homicide squad. The term sounds forensic, clinical, Anglo-German. It sits next to the word Demokratia in the newsreel on cinemas. He signs his first democratic warrant for a search in a case of domestic violence turned deadly. He is relieved to be working with blood that has a person's name attached and not a party label. 1951. The 131er law, named after Article 31 of the Basic Law, extends reinstatement to a large class of former civil servants. It is a piece of arithmetic with a political shield around it. The Interior Minister of North Rhine-Westphalia writes to curators of police personnel that ranks need to be filled. The Cold War is now the absolute. Experience is a currency. The old networks lift up the old colleagues. A memo in the Interior Ministry's file reads, caveat, however, experienced Kripo investigators essential for public security. The margins of the memo show pencil ticks next to names. Many tick marks eventually become a nameplate on a door. Carl keeps his head down. He works cases. He is asked quietly in 1953 to attend a seminar on subversion, offered by an American advisory group in Dusseldorf. Speeches about the East, slides about the KGB. He sits under an air vent in a room still smelling of wartime dust. The math changes but not the variables. Now the category is communist. He is told to watch leftist associations. He remembers the case files from 1933-34 that had already treated these associations as criminal. He does not volunteer that memory. He does not throw out the old index cards. 1952. Millions of East German refugees come through the interzonal border from the East Zone to the West. A woman arrives with a suitcase and writes political reasons on the form. The border is more porous than it will be in 1961 after the wall. The arithmetic of suspicion is tugged between compassion for those fleeing and the fever of infiltration. Karl is given a directive to cooperate with the newly formed Verfassungsschutz, the Office for the Protection of the Constitution. He recognizes the shape of the work. He tells himself that this is different. The state is different. There is legal oversight. There are limits. He throws away a rubber hose from a locker during renovations. He does not say why. 1956. The KPD is banned by the Federal Constitutional Court. The decision runs to hundreds of pages. He reads summaries. His office receives a list of former KPD officials in his area. The list contains familiar names. The drawers become time capsules when they are not emptied. He compares an index card from 1934 with a typed sheet from 1956 and finds the same man with white hair now, still on a list. He notes in his notebook, names repeat. We repeat too if we are not careful. But he attends a meeting to discuss surveillance of a union hall anyway. The mathematics of the Cold War is absolute and indifferent. He carries out orders. He believes that this time the chain of command points into a different moral direction, even if the techniques are familiar. He wonders. He does not speak in the cafeteria when the subject comes up. He keeps his voice for the room where an autopsy is discussed. He knows where certainties are permitted. All this time the city changes. Volkswagen payrolls expand. Krupp regains, then regains again. A steelworker buys a refrigerator in 1958 and remembers a period when he cooled milk by lowering it into the well in the courtyard. A departmental store manager writes in an oral history, "We had to train our sales girls to smile like Americans." The Marshall Plan crates had long since been opened and their wood repurposed into cupboards. Gario A, then the European Recovery Program, had already worked through the economy like medicine. There are new cafes and a different kind of coat, longer and lighter. Peacetime has a smell too. It smells like coffee that is not chicory. Schoolbooks change. They simplify. They do not lie outright in the 1950s, but they focus on bombings and expulsions and victory and rebuilding. A West German 8th grade textbook, 1957 edition, offers 2 pages on the Nazi period and 5 on the economic miracle. It calls dictators tyrants. It does not name local functionaries. It delays the discovery of responsibility to a later decade. The arithmetic of memory is skewed by what is safe to say before the next class bell. Teachers talk about hunger because it can be discussed without pointing at a man in the 3rd row of a Veterans Association meeting on Sunday. Monuments are erected. They say Den Opfern von Krieg und Gewaltschaft to the victims of war and tyranny. The wording folds categories into a single stone. It is easier to approach. It is also a way to avoid naming. Oral histories of high school students interviewed in 1995 about their grandparents confess that the stone was a meeting place, a set piece in photographs, not a lesson. Their grandparents had their own arithmetic. A widow in 1955 would account for her life in terms of nights in the cellar and years of waiting for her husband's status to be changed from missing to dead. She has no appetite for hearing about the categories down the road. Meanwhile, German courts slowly begin to look. The Ulm trial in 1958, a docket about the Einsatzgruppen, is reported in the newspaper. Karl reads it in the tram. He folds the paper. He knows men who served in police battalions who went east in 1941. He knows they came back. He knows some didn't. He knows that in the files there are orders, and then there are silences. He remembers a colleague who told a room in 1942 that he had seen something outside Minsk. The colleague drank. The colleague is now a police advisor in a ministry. The mathematics of promotion does not include a column for ghosts. May 1960. Eichmann's capture is on the radio. The newspapers are agog. An Israeli agent, Buenos Aires. There is a current in the city that is like a slight electrical charge. This is not our business, people say when someone brings it up at a kitchen table. Karl listens. He has his line ready, even if he never says it. I used to investigate political enemies. Now I investigate murders. He wants that distance like a wall. He knows the wall is glass. He has cases. On 2 February 1960, a body is found in a canal. Male, 30, skull fracture. The case file fills. He sends a note to the pathology lab. He re-interviews a girlfriend. He stands in a cold room with a clerk whose hair is sprayed into a new decade and fills out a report titled Tatzeit und Tatausführung. He writes, "Witness contradicts herself, possible self-protection." The habits that served him in 1938 serve him now. Note contradictions, test alibis, triangulate time. He will not physically strike a suspect. He will raise an eyebrow and leave a silence where a man will fill it with an admission. He learned the power of silence in the late 1930s. He changed the use. He tells himself that is enough. He also knows that when the City magazine runs a profile of the Homicide Squad in 1959, the journalist uses the old romantic language of Sperhunde, bloodhounds, and harte Jungs, hard men. The public loves the idea that order is restored by men who can read streets like books. There is honor in it. There is continuity in it. His colleague is named Heinz and wears a tie pin. The personnel file shows that in 1933, Heinz wrote an essay about community. In 1960, he writes memos about car theft rings. The conversion is technical. Heinz votes for the CDU. Heinz sits on a dais at a company anniversary and claps for a man who runs the factory and who wore a uniform once. The arithmetic of credit is that the post-war years are full of deposit and withdrawal that are not recorded in banks. There are still expellees in the city in 1960. Many are now shop owners. Emmanuel, a Jew who stayed after release from a camp because he had nothing else, runs a fabric store. He is addressed as Herr E. and not given first name familiarity. He says in a 1973 oral history, they thought the dead were stories. They were not stories. They were people I loved. He recalls one German buyer in 1951 who could not look him in the eye when paying for cloth. The buyer is now dead. The receipt was thrown away. The memory outlasts paper in some cases. In others, paper outlasts memory. Karl assigns himself to safe zones. He can be exact in a place where a weapon, a time, a body, and a motive will eventually add up. He hides in the arithmetic of murder. There is a crime. There is an investigation. There is a confession sometimes. There is a trial. There is a sentence. He can add and subtract within that frame and not touch the numbers that do not balance in other rooms in his head. He knows this is an evasion. He calls it a profession. He knows the archive will hold him anyway. He knows because in 1957, a letter arrives from the Bundesarchiv regarding personnel files. He is asked for a signature to release his service record to a commission studying continuity in the justice system. He signs. He receives no follow-up. The study will be published in the 1970s. It will include a chart that shows that half of the senior leadership in the West German criminal police in 1959 had served under the Nazis. He will see that chart. He will feel a chill. He will go for a walk around the lake where the coal barges used to turn. He hears the old slogans in new clothes sometimes. Order, someone says at a city council meeting about youth violence. He knows how the word can shift weight. He speaks only about budget. He holds his tongue and lets the new mayor, who is young enough that 1945 is a story told by uncles, speak about European friendship. He believes that too. He can do two things at once in the same skull. He writes in late 1960, "The arithmetic of rooms is now the arithmetic of appliances. There are shortages of flat-screen televisions in the catalogue of next year." He is joking with himself. He stops and writes a more serious line. The mathematics of guilt is not summed in courtrooms alone. It's in how quickly we look down at the pavement when a certain name is spoken. Everything stands next to everything. The coal dust that still rises from the rail yard has the same texture as the dust of 1944 that rose when a house collapsed. That is fact and not metaphor. The air remembers. He is not a monster in his own story. He is not a hero. He is a policeman. He arranges his life in order of force of habit. He writes more. 1 November 1946. He arrests a man who held a gun to a baker's head for bread. The man's wife is crying. He files the report under B for Becker. 12 July 1949. He is told to hand over his service pistol to get a new one with a British serial number. He likes the weight of the old one. He hands it over. He thinks, briefly, that objects remember. 26 August 1953. He sends a note to the prosecutor about a stabbing. He adds a postscript. The witness is an expellee. Her German is different. Provide interpreter if needed. He remembers the snide jokes in the station in 1946 and realizes he did not think those were jokes. He is human enough to call himself out on it in a note he will later destroy. 14 January 1957. He and Heinz attend a training on new fingerprint techniques using powder that smells like burned popcorn. He writes, American film reels. Identical to ours in content. Different in accent. He comes home and tells his wife about the instructor. He does not tell her about a dream he had the night before in which a man without a name tag asked him to sit in a chair he knew too. He has learned that not every confession must be filed. The contact with the Jewish survivors has a final chapter in his city when the synagogue is rebuilt. 1959. The cornerstone is laid. There is a speech about tolerance. There is a reference to terrible events. The arithmetic of naming is again partial. A survivor speaks anyway. We are here. He sends a small anonymous donation to the synagogue building fund. He does not tell anyone. He never joins a veterans association. He refuses to be photographed in his Nazi-era uniform for family archives. He destroys his party card in 1945 by burning it in a tin bowl, then sifting through the ashes with a spoon, then crushing them underfoot. He will later wonder why he did it with such theatrical care when so many had joined and burned. He will answer himself, because it was the one moment he felt he could adjust the ledger. There is in his office an old drawer with index cards on domestic murders from the 1930s. He sometimes uses them to compare patterns. He never acknowledges to a young detective that some of those index cards were written when the office had a different portrait on the wall. He just says, "Past murders can teach us about present ones. Knives do not change." The detective nods. The city continues to accumulate. 1962. The Spiegel Affair. A test of the Constitution. Police raids on journalists. He is instructed to assist if needed. He refuses with a line about staffing and sends Hines. He is not sure whether he is cowardly or principled. He writes silence as a tactic in a note and underlines it. He knows again that this thought could not be voiced. 1963. A man in a factory he is investigating for embezzlement turns out to have been a camp guard. He sees the note in the file. He does nothing with the note. He investigates the numbers of the payroll instead. He goes home and feels sick. He tells his wife that he thinks he has a cold. He wonders if justice can be done if it arrives late. He knows the answer in philosophy. He does not know it in the practice of a Wednesday. He reads literature. Bull, Borchardt. Truma literature had been short and stark. By 1960, writers find new words for avoidance. He underlines sentences about modest men who had done harm by staying modest in the wrong years, and staying modest in the new ones too. He is not a great reader. He is a file reader. He understands the difference. In another file, a young man born in 1940 kills a man in a fight in a bar in 1961. The father of the young man had been a soldier in the East. The young man says he never spoke. The absentee father is not a cause, but is a context. Carl notes it. He writes, "The arithmetic of sons without fathers is visible in arrest logs." He is a policeman. He sees patterns. In 1964, he stands in front of a class of recruits and tells them that the purpose of the police is to secure rights. Young faces. Born during the war. Born after. He sees in the third row a young man of 21 who will be part of a generation that will demand that men like Carl speak plainly in 1968. He still speaks, in 1964, in phrases collected from manuals and from a conscience that has learned to write. We follow the law. We do not follow men. It is not a lie. It is also incomplete as a life summary. He writes late at night and early in the morning. He keeps the notebook in the same drawer as the badge. He writes about the lights in the hospital corridor where a victim's family waits. He writes about the way a rifle butt sounds on paving stones when an English soldier is doing his job and does not hate you. He writes about the first time he wrote the word murder in a Democratic case and did not feel a second word inside it, traitor, that had haunted his pen hand before. He writes that he cannot forget one interview with a girl in 1942 who was 16 and had given leaflets to workers and had smiled at him not with fear but pity. He had not been able to bring her to cry. He had felt something like humiliation. He cannot write the word now. He writes, "I was small in that room." He tracks the arithmetic of categories in his mind like a ledger with poor lighting. Major offenders, in prison or already in graves. Offenders, some tried, many not. Lesser offenders, in seats. Followers, everywhere. Exonerated, social. He places himself across two columns like a man with a foot on each streetcar step. The cars pull in different directions. He shares a bench with Hines once in 1965 and says, "Do you remember?" and then stops. Hines says, "I do." They smoke. They talk about football. They walk back to the office. The silence is not empty. It is a wall load, bearing enough to hold up a building. Later, pupils will ask in schools why their grandparents stayed quiet. The answer is arithmetic. To keep a daily life running, you add bread, subtract fear, multiply silence, divide blame. The results are livable. They are not just. Conscience survived anyway, in notebooks, in sudden nights, in the way a man organizes his desk. The Bundesarchiv will one day list the files in an index accessible to all. BA B5622XXXX. Personnel of the Kriminalpolizei, Essen. The page will have his name. It will say Mitläufer. It will say Kriminalkommissar 1952. A historian will read it. A grandson will read it. The grandson will ask his mother. The mother will sit at a table. She will say, "He never talked. He kept a clean desk." The historian will look for documents. He will find a notebook. He will run his fingers over the indent of the sentence written 3 March 1960. He will copy it into a thesis. He will not be able to throw away the physical feeling of pressure in that line. Karl lives out the decade. He retires. He moves 14 kilometers to a smaller town. He walks into a church where 2 windows are new glass made in 1955. He hears a sermon about guilt. He does not hear his name. He writes in his notebook in 1967 after listening to young people in the street shout, "Unter den Talaren, Muff von 1000 Jahren, under the robes, the must of 1,000 years." He smiles bitterly and with admiration. He writes, "They are right to ask. They are also to L."